Is ransomware on the rise? It sure is.
Then, the climate change story, what the media is getting right and wrong.
And the rocky relationship between Grub Hub and the restaurants.
I'm Steven Rosenbaum, and this is Future Forward.
I'm Alexis Scordato. Let's launch.
Hey, Alexa.
Hey, Steve. I'm so
I
excited for today's
I
episode.
I know we have a new friend joining us. Probably in our community, my guess is Laura. Lots of people know you, but if you don't know Laura Fitton, then you know her as at Pistachio, which I never thought of you as a nut, but now that you say it that way, I understand. As our listeners know, Alexa is about 3 seconds away from having a baby, or a week or 3 weeks, but soon. And Laura is joining us to fill in. I keep wanting to say Alexa's big shoes, but then I realized you can't really say that. Her
I don't know, my
impressive.
feet and legs have gotten very swollen in the last week, so you can say that they're big. Physically.
So we have a show in 3 chapters today. Chapter 1 is about ransomware. Chapter 2 is going to be about climate, and then chapter 3 is going to be about Grub Hub. But Laura, start by just telling us, so that our listeners know a little bit about your work, like what you've been doing and kind of your area of interest. And I know it's climate broadly, but you used a phrase that I'd never heard before, which was climate economy. I literally never heard that phrase before.
Right, which isn't that crazy that we're not using that phrase? Because we saw how COVID affected the economy, right? No one expected it. Nobody had a COVID plan, but it massively affected all aspects of the economy. And yet we've known about climate change. I've got a paper I wrote for Carl Sagan right here 30 years ago. We've known about climate change forever, and we still don't talk about its impact on the economy and what's that going to be. And unfortunately, the side that kind of wants to keep doing the fossil fuel thing has done a great branding job of convincing everybody that climate is an expensive thing to fix, right? That's just accepted truth. Well, guess what? It's way more expensive to not fix. And I'll tell you, a couple industries already know this really, really well. I'm looking at you, insurance. I'm looking at you, reconstruction in terms of opportunity after there's these horrible disasters. But there's a bunch of climate risk, and it's not disclosed. And that is what markets hate. Undisclosed, unquantified risk is very, very dangerous for financial assets. So I'm kind of on this tear to convince the greediest people on earth that they need to be very quickly, very proactively responding in climate just because it's good business sense. And I do that through enough.co.
So let's do this. Actually, let's jump right into the second topic, and because we're in it, you just actually gave it a really good setup, and talk about the media as it relates to climate. Because, on one hand, there's we did a bunch of research and pulled some clips, and there is some theoretical good news. Although if you read below the headlines, there's some puzzling stuff. So let's just start with this Axios news. The Associated Press is adding 20 new positions to cover climate. So that's good, right?
I thought that was great. I thought that was very reflective of in the past 2 years. I started Enough.co. I got the idea October 2019, started January 2020. I've gone through cycles of being like really loud about it and really quiet about it. That was mostly health and pandemic. But back then, when I went in and told VC friends, like, hey, I'm looking at the climate economy, they're like, oh, you should go talk to some do-gooder investors, right? They didn't see it as core to their portfolio. And we've seen a drastic turnaround in that in 2 years. And I think Axios, being so business and startup oriented, going, we need 20 staffers covering this, shows really good initial signs of awakening.
So the only thing about the article is, if you read down below the fold, which I try to do on everything that we put on the show, it says that the funding, it looks like the funding for this 20 positions is going to come from Murdoch, which puzzles me because Murdoch has this weather channel that he's launching, which seems like it's going to be pretty anti-climate reporting, kind of in its core DNA. So, I guess, Associated Press has to take money from whoever will support new initiatives, but I worried about
his bets, Steve. It's all about
he's on
the
either
money.
side.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, so which brings me, I'll just jump to this next article because this is the Fox News article. The headline is "Media Hype, Climate Disaster. If Build Back Better fails, civilization at stake." And this is essentially Fox's drumbeat that that climate is fake news, which they say pretty regularly. I find myself wondering if, and this is maybe a larger media question for both of you, like, does anyone who's smart and reads detailed reports actually believe that climate change isn't, like, are the people that genuinely believe it's untrue, or do they just say it to kind of gin up the base?
I don't know. Laura, I'm so curious what you think about this, because this is a very sad take. I almost feel like climate change and COVID are so politicized that if you feel one way about it, I've never been successful in convincing someone who doesn't think it's real, through facts, science, logic, that it's something to be taken seriously. But maybe, Laura, you have different take or different strategies and approaches.
No, I'm 100% with you. I started as an activist in high school, right? That was a really long time ago. I was organizing a march on the state capitol in 1989, right, in Connecticut, to support the Tongass Forest, which we're still having to fight for. And then I went and got a degree in environmental science and public policy. I'm like, activism's great, but we're not quite making it over the edge. We're not getting to where we need to get with Rio in '92 in terms of what the world needs to be doing. So then I looked at policy and did the Cornell in Washington, did the research papers, and I felt like policy was too slow too, right? In fact, I burned out so hard on environment activism and environmental policy that I went into this whole other career in communications and tech. And I'm literally one of the people Greta Thunberg meant when she said, "You adults knew and you didn't do anything," right? That's literally 100%. That's me. Like, shot hit, it landed. But I think it's because the convincing is so difficult. Activism is convincing based. Politics is convincing based. Where I want to see things really light up, and I am seeing early signs that are very positive, is if we can apply market forces correctly, right? So when I first started talking about markets and climate, everybody's response tends to be, "Oh, you mean like that stuff that's more expensive, but environmentalists are willing to pay the green premium?" And no, that's not a market force, right? That's convincing. That's great. That's convincing. There are people who will do that. There are not enough people who will do that. What I'm talking about, and my God, talk about a company that's really kind of a hot mess right now, but they did do one really good thing. Tesla didn't look at electric vehicles and go, "I'm going to start an activist group and tell people, convince them to get electric vehicles." It didn't go to the government and say, "We need mandates that people have to drive electric vehicles." It used market forces to say, "Look, here's the price point it's going to cost us to bring electric vehicle to market. Who buys cars at those price points?" Okay, sports cars, performance cars. We're going to have to build an electric performance car, right? So let's set aside everything else about Tesla right now, because especially recently, there was a lot wrong with that company. But that shift, that, how do I sell climate to the greediest people on earth? There's, God, I can't remember his name right now, but there's a fairly famous Republican investor in the South, very conservative, very this, very that, who made a killing on solar because he's like, the economics work. It's cheaper. It's a great investment for my money. I'm doubling down on solar right now, right? Nobody convinced him about woke or not woke or climate or not climate. We've really I'm trying to pull people away from that convincing into realizing, like where it hits you the most. You don't want to lose your money and you have the chance to make lots of money. And boy, the radical high school activist me hears those words coming out of my mouth and goes, "You freaking sellout." But it's the only thing I've seen in doing a tech startup and selling it to another software company and watching them scale up. The only thing I've seen that scales fast enough in the US in this day and age are markets. And so I'm trying to figure out how to engage them more effectively.
So let me part of, I'm a media guy in my DNA. So I'm one of the last people that watches television news. I record it. I don't watch it in real time. And they now cover weather virtually as the lead story, I'd say 3 of 5 nights a week. If Trump hasn't done something or if there isn't a war going on, weather is the lead story. But they almost never say climate. They cover the fires, the hurricanes, the floods. And at first I blamed the news organizations, and I still do a little bit. But if you're a booker at ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, PBS, and you try and get a scientist to say the words, fire damage and climate, or flood and damage, or hurricane and climate, they always hedge. And I understand why, but the media just has no bandwidth it's a yes or no question. Is this climate related? Well, there's some evidence, and the booker's gone at that point. Is it just impossible to say for sure that all this terrible weather disasters are having is climate, or do we need to retrain some spokespeople to be more definitive?
I too am in the camp of wishing they'd be more definitive, but I thought this third article that we were all looking at had some really interesting points to make, that sometimes just getting that term in there really triggers people, right? And sometimes it's more helpful. Again, I'm all about connecting people to things they already know they care about. I love environmentalists. I'm an environmentalist to the core. This is nothing against environmentalists, nothing against the sustainability movement in corporate America, even though that's kind of just a PR play in too many cases. Nothing against either of those things. There just aren't enough environmentalists. We need everybody to care. We need everybody to care. And so we have to connect to the things they care about. They care about losing their home in a hurricane. They care about losing their home in a forest fire. They care about losing their home from neither of those, but simply because insurance is no longer affordable or no longer gettable, right? This is going to hit everybody everywhere their money is. And that's what I'm trying to get more people in the climate movement to talk about, more people out of the climate movement to talk about, everything about how we earn, how we spend, where we save our money, right? Because banks take our money and invest it in things. And most banks, I guarantee, where the three of us have our money, and I've known this for 2 years and been trying to get away from it, most banks where we have our money are still investing in fossil fuels and other climate destructive stuff. So where we earn our money, where we spend our money, where we save our money, and if we have money to invest or time to invest, where we are investing right now for most of us is making climate worse.
So I listened to This American Life yesterday. I didn't put it in the show notes, but I will. And it was all about climate. It was specifically about Southern California and about the plans to begin to address beach erosion and houses falling off of the cliffs. And I guess there's a California proposal called Strategic Retreat. And the idea is essentially we have to begin to move away from the ocean because the ocean is going to drop a cliff. And what was fascinating about it was the number of organized groups that were against any kind of activity to plan for climate. Real estate agents were against it because it lowered property values. Homeowners were against it. Nobody wanted to be labeled that they were in a flood zone or that they were in a strategic reserve. But like, if you listen to the interviews, and This American Life is a wonderfully made podcast. Everyone, these are human beings, and they're like, we spend our life savings on this house. If this law goes through and we're labeled as being in a strategic retreat zone, we'll lose all of the value. No one will buy our house. And it's like, when you planning for climate seemed like a worse idea. And one guy was interesting. The reporter said to him, when do you think, if you don't do anything, when do you think your house will lose value? And he said, after I'm gone. I was like, ouch.
Yeah.
But
even if they fight the policy to death, they're going to lose the insurance before they lose the house. Right. And for some people, that doesn't matter if they own it and they're willing to expose their life savings to that much risk. But for most people, there is some kind of a mortgage in play, and losing insurance is going to trigger losing the mortgage, is going to trigger you really have no value because no one can buy it. It doesn't matter what the policy was or wasn't. And that's why we really need to have our eyes open about these market forces and start thinking, creatively about them, right?
All right,
Maybe
we're
there's
gonna
insurance
we're gonna
policy that could be brought to market that covers all these really high at-risk coastal houses, but what you get when there is a loss is money to move somewhere else. You don't get
all
your
right.
house
So
back.
we're gonna switch over because we have two more chapters. We're gonna come back to climate. It'll be one of our topics going forward. Uh, let's jump to ransomware. So, Alexa, you've got your head deep in the tech world. Uh, is this
This is
a
like
real
so
thing?
nerdy.
Yeah,
Hard
yeah,
pivot.
that's what. Yeah, it is nerdy. It most certainly is. Why do people pay?
Because they don't know any better.
Oh,
I
I don't
mean,
think that's. I don't see. I think you're wrong there. I think it's just the cheaper answer.
like
Like,
like pay to make it go away, right?
if you're a company and, I mean, this is a ZDNet story, and it basically says, the growth of, I mean, the question is ransomware governments? Is it organized criminal, groups, or is it, the hacker in the basement and the attacks are against these very important, civic operations, hospitals and schools and pipelines. I mean, it's not like they're going after, companies that you could shrug your shoulders at. I mean, they're going after critical infrastructure, and they're getting paid, and they're being advised by ransomware advisors to just write the check, just make it go away, get your data back.
I mean, what are the alternatives?
Um, harden your, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I now find anytime I call for a prescription, or to deal with something in my savings, or anything that has data involved, the number of hoops you now have to go through: mother's maiden name, and name of your first dog, and what color was your car, and there are all these and it's just endless kind of, the last four digits is your social security number. I mean, I probably give some version of that answer 10 times a day. And I used to feel bad about it. And now that I read this article, I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't. Maybe I really should be more worried about data security.
That's what jumped out to me, like knowing how economically destructive these attacks can be, how simple some of the points of entry were, how low that bar was in terms of what would have actually prevented the attack at all.
And look at the Twitter thing was it a year and a half or 2 years ago? It was just it's just individual contributors or employees at a company. It's clicking the wrong link in an email. It is potentially leaving your work laptop, unpassword protected while you run to the bathroom in a coffee shop. Like, there's so many vulnerabilities. And I guess that's what I was saying. Like, it's an oversimplification, but like, people don't know any better. Or, I mean, maybe this whole podcast is actually just all about marketing. We don't know how to market climate change, and we don't know how to market the importance of data security inside.
I think there's some real usability and design issues as well, right? Some of the most robust login systems are actually some of the most dangerous, because you get a developer or a team who's just so gung-ho on security that they set the bar at, like, somebody who's way into crypto and Reddit levels, right? And the rest of us, even the fairly tech savvy, just can't make it work. Facebook has a usability problem on their mobile app. When you get a new phone and you try and log into your old account, the login is super buggy. And my mother, who just turned 80, like literally 3 days ago, every time she gets a new phone, she creates a whole new Facebook account because she's following the logical flow of it. And I really can't even fault her for that, right? So if we design these so robust that ordinary humans, they're not usable and they can't actually do them and do the 2FA and have it work easily, you actually get a more dangerous situation than if you built a medium security solution where every user has an easy time amping that security up.
So I was a family, I hate to admit this, but until about, I don't know, probably 5 years ago, we had like one word password that then had a bunch of variations on the end of it. And we finally agreed, after some family negotiation, to go to a password manager, and we went to LastPass, which I really like, and it generates these great big complicated strings of numbers and letters and symbols. So the other day we were trying to log into, I don't even know what it was. It was like Amazon Prime Video on our new LG TV, and it said, "What's your password?" And I'm like, "Okay, it's 14 characters of," and it was like there wasn't any, and I was like, "How do I cut and paste that from?" Nope. So we had to sit there and go small x, capital Y, small L, but horrible, horrible. And you make a mistake, which we always do. I mean, it took about half an hour.
The usability has to be there. And God forbid your iPhone bricks. I couldn't log into anything for 2.5 days because everything was 2FA because I'm smart and careful, but it debilitated me for, it took a while to replace the phone. And it was just, whoa, I can't do anything without my phone.
Which means you end up delightfully happy with, biometrics because it knows your face or it knows your thumbprint, which is insane. Like, we're all technologists. There's no way that's a good thing that I'm giving away my thumb. Yeah, right. But I mean, that's one of the things that masking has changed is, I lived on my face recognition login on my iPhone. And of course, with masking, that doesn't work.
Yes, the like.
I was thinking about this, Steve, sometimes. Every once in a while, I'm always like, the amount of video footage and audio footage from this show, like, anyone can just replicate our online identities so easily.
You could be deep faked.
Yeah. You don't even need to replace me, Steve. You could just deep fake me first.
I could do like an avatar, like an AI avatar. All right. So the last topic, which is kind of lighter, but maybe not really.
No, it's so depressing, this one.
Yeah.
So depressing because we all love eating and.
So here's where this story came from. So the Sunday of the Super Bowl, my wife and I decided, for reasons that will remain baffling to everyone who knows us, that we wanted for dinner to order pizza. Didn't occur to us that everyone else on the face of the earth was ordering pizza on Sunday, Super Bowl. We called the pizza parlor that's a block from our house. We could have walked there, but we didn't. And we went online and we ordered it, and they used Grub Hub. We ordered at 7 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, Grub Hub said, we're arriving. Never showed up. We called Grub Hub. They called the restaurant. They couldn't get an answer. The pizza arrived ice cold at 10:15. And I'm like, this is broken in so many ways. Why did I give Grubhub the business? Why didn't I just call it? And by the way, you can't. It was the Super Bowl, so maybe it's an outlier. But the relationship between when you as a small restaurant allow a third party to own the relationship between you and your customer, bad things are going to happen. And I have to say, I don't really understand the Grubhub business model, but Alexa, I know you do.
So, okay, first of all, if you're ever going to order delivery pizza and you're in an area that has a Slice app, is the way to go, because unlike Grubhub, which charges a 30% premium for their service, Slice is just a flat $2.25 to the restaurant.
Grubhub charges 30%?
Yeah.
That's horrific.
So that's why when you're like, I don't know about you guys, but like every single time I order takeout, like for 2 people, I actually can't get an order for less than like $70. After you work in like tax, delivery fees, a tip. And what I'm seeing more and more is the cost of the items themselves actually being raised. So restaurant owners and businesses are marking up the menu prices to help offset that 15 to 30% premium that all of the delivery apps are charging.
And they have to. I mean, restaurant margins to begin with, right? Pre-pandemic, all normal world, like life going out, margins at restaurants are so razor thin.
Right. They usually get it in the form of alcohol, like beverages.
Yeah, which isn't in the takeout model,
Right.
except, luckily some of the interesting innovations from the pandemic have been some ability to do takeout cocktails, but not everywhere. So that's been incredibly tough. And yeah, it's hard enough to run a restaurant to begin with and make any kind of money when you have these third parties coming in and taking so much of that. It really, really damages the restaurant's ability to even stay in business.
Did
But
you
look,
laugh
but
at
look,
the cost of the pizza?
well,
What?
yeah, it was $70.
Yep.
We had a salad. It was $65. It was a salad and a pizza, and it was $65. And by the way, luckily, even though they're charging 30%, at least they're paying their drivers fairly. That's it. That's sarcasm. I'm delivering sarcasm there. I mean,
Oh.
yeah, no, I don't think they are.
Really?
I mean, no. I think, one of the things that I think about this a lot. I mean, when the App Store started on Apple, everything was free, right? When ads started on YouTube, they were 2 seconds and then you could skip them. When you start, all these things take capital, front load a low price so that you say, I'm just going to jump on Uber because it's a better price than the taxi cab and a better ride. And then as soon as they've dominated the market, I mean, I don't know, in New York, Uber is expensive. Uber is expensive. It is cheaper to get in a cab. But once you're hooked on the app and it tells you when it's coming and, you don't have to stand out in the rain. But like every Uber ride I'm in now is $30.
I mean, I don't know about Uber because as a woman, I stopped using Uber 7 or 8 years ago when things started to get really awful about that company. Not sure Lyft is much better. Obviously, in pandemic times, I have the privilege of not really using either very much. But yeah, I mean, once you get a stronger competitive hold on a market, you don't have to. I mean, Amazon in the early days, I remember my boss at my first real job was this crazy entrepreneur, and he just lambasted Jeff Bezos every chance he got. Like, this is the dumbest thing ever. All he's doing is selling books at a loss. He says he's doing it for scale. He's just going to scale his loss to have a bigger loss, right? And we are not in touch, but I'd be really curious to hear what he has to say now, right? And so people do take those loss leaders to get market position, and then once they've got that market position, they can kind of do what they want.
Amazon would be a good show to do because if we debated Amazon, I could take either side of the debate. It's horrible. It's amazing. It's changed the world. It's destroyed the world.
Yeah.
And Bezos is a good guy. Bezos is a bad guy. I'm not sure. We should do an Amazon show because there's so many chapters. We could do AWS. We could do grocery. We could do pharmacy. We could do baby products. All right, and with that, perfect transition. We are running out of time for today's program. Alexa, I have a question to ask.
Yeah.
So as Laura and I move forward, will we get updates from you? Because your fans will want to know what's going on.
Yeah, I can drop in once in a while. I mean, again, this is uncharted territory for me. This is my first. I have no idea what my recovery is going to look like. I have no idea what it's like to care for a newborn. I will eventually reemerge.
I will share with you. Maybe Laura has a different bit of advice. My advice is children are easy. They're stress-free. They don't cost anything. They won't change your life at all. It's just a complete smooth sailing, no problem.
This is right up there with COVID isn't real, climate change is this.
100% +1, what he said. Yeah, no. But there's really only 2 pieces of advice that should be given to new parents. Do you want them?
Yeah, let's hear it.
I always ask people if they want your advice, especially around new parenting.
Actually, no, people don't ask me; they just give it to me. So
that's my point. It was the worst. Being a pregnant woman was horrible. I had all these T-shirts I wanted to make that were like, "Yeah, go ahead, grab my stomach. Can I grab your butt? Like whatever." I don't know if I can curse on here, so I cleaned it up.
Someone touched my stomach the other day, and I touched theirs back.
Good. Oh, it's awful. It's awful. They come up and they're like, they tell you the worst possible disaster story of a childbirth or a pregnancy, and you're like, why did you think I want to hear that right now. But no, the only two pieces of advice I've ever given to somebody in your position about to give birth is that little newborn. It's incredibly hard, right? That little newborn, when it falls asleep on your shoulder, that is crack for the human limbic system. It is just like the best feeling, the best. And for all the strife and all the hassle and all the nightmares, you get about 2 weeks of that, right? And so if you have like 4 kids, you maybe get 8 weeks in your entire life where you have that little tiny bag of flour sound asleep on your shoulder, and your entire metabolic system is just making all the right hormones. So like, while you're battling through all the things that are hard about it, try and crave and savor those because they're amazing. And then the only other piece of advice is all the people who want to come visit baby as soon as it's born. Here's who's allowed to come visit baby. The people where you could answer the door in your dirtiest night, bathrobe with your hair a mess, hand them a basket of dirty laundry and go take a nap. Those are who you visit. That's it. Nobody else.
By the way, that's great advice. All right. Well, Alexa, we will stay in touch. Laura, welcome. Delighted to have you. It's a lovely handoff, and we will see you guys all again next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.